Hello and welcome to this Astranti video. Today we'll be looking at the difference between tax evasion and tax avoidance. Now this is a topic which comes up in the media all the time and people often get confused between them. It's important that you get this right, not simply because one is legal and the other is illegal, but this is something which could come up in both your F1 and E1 CIMA exams. This is an extract from our video on Chapter 19 of our F1 course, but if you want to see the full video, this can be found on the Astranti website as part of our full course. So without further ado, let's jump in and take a look at the difference between tax avoidance and tax evasion.
So we'll start with tax evasion, and tax evasion is simply the intentional concealment or misrepresentation of income, and tax evasion is absolutely 100% illegal. It means you are breaking the law because you're deliberately concealing income or misrepresenting income to avoid having to pay taxes. Okay, and some examples of tax evasion would be omitting income from your tax return. So again, if you're self-employed and you don't want to pay as much tax as you should, so you say your income was lower than it really was to avoid paying taxes, that is tax evasion. That is illegal. If you are found to be engaging in that, then you will be in serious trouble. If you just don't submit any return at all, especially if you're self-employed or whatever, if you don't file your taxes, that can be interpreted as tax evasion if the reason for not submitting it is to deliberately not pay your taxes rather than you didn't know you had to pay one, which is probably not an excuse that would hold up in a court of law. If you hide funds in tax havens in the UK, there are the Cayman, not in the UK, but part of the former British Commonwealth. We have the Cayman Islands, and that's a common place that the wealthy will hide funds, income, companies even, to avoid having to pay taxes, and we call those tax havens. They are technically illegal, but it's very difficult to do anything about those sometimes, particularly from the government's perspective. Also, if you have very complex links between types of legal entity and you set up lots of different firms and you have companies and one is a parent and subsidiary of the other, and one's an associate and one of them is located here and the other one is registered in the EU, one of them is the Cayman Islands, that kind of deliberately complex links in order to reduce tax is also considered tax evasion, and again, tax evasion is always illegal. Tax avoidance, on the other hand, is the reduction of the tax bill within the letter of the law, but it's done in a way that benefits the individual in an attempt to reduce the tax bill. And generally it is legal, sort of. And by that I mean any sort of instance of tax avoidance, or most instances of tax avoidance, at the time that they are committed, they are usually legal. Maybe it's due to a loophole in a certain law or in legislation, but once that loophole is discovered by the tax authorities, it tends to be closed, and then that action, that behavior does become evasion. So it's legal sort of, but eventually it often becomes illegal, and it maybe isn't even illegal in the first place sometimes. Now, it's worth pointing out that tax avoidance isn't necessarily the same as legitimate tax planning, and in tax planning what you're doing is using tax relief in the way intended by the government. So the government does set up certain things that taxpayers can do to reduce their overall tax bill, and the government is happy for people to do that. They recommend that people do that. So some examples of tax planning would be to use tax exempt savings accounts. So an ISA, for example, an ISA, that is a savings account where you don't pay tax on your savings up to a certain threshold, and that's a way you can put money into an account and avoid taxes, and the government are perfectly fine with you using that. Similarly, pension contributions can be tax deductible, so the more you contribute to your pension, the less your overall tax bill will be, and once again the government are fine with you doing that because effectively you are contributing more to your own pension, thus taking care of yourselves and reducing the obligation of the government to actually pay for your pension. So they're happy to cut your tax for certain things, and that is legitimately different to full-on tax avoidance or artificial tax avoidance, where what you're doing is you're manipulating tax laws, perhaps taking advantage of loopholes that the government doesn't know about to produce a tax advantage, overall reducing your tax bill. So, for example, the UK national insurance contributions was an example of that a few years ago, because the way it was worded in the legislation for national insurance contributions, and this refers to the contribution a company needs to make on behalf of their employees to national insurance, it was worded in a way that it specifically referred to cash payments. And so what companies were doing were, rather than paying in cash, they would pay their employees in gold or in holidays or in cars and physical objects, not in cash, thus removing them from the obligation of making national insurance contributions. Now, that's an example of manipulating the law, taking advantage of particular wording in order to reduce your tax bill, and that is tax avoidance. And that's what we're talking about with tax avoidance, where it's sort of legal, but once the government found out about it, they changed the wording and it no longer became legal. That is not the same as tax planning, which are legitimate government schemes that you can sort of take part in to reduce your overall tax bill.
So we've now come to the end of this video, and you should now have a better grasp on the differences between tax evasion and tax avoidance. However, this extract was only the tip of the iceberg, and there's much more you'll need to know for your CIMA exams. You can find the full video on our website as part of our full course, where you can also access other videos, study texts, mocks, exam practice kits, and revision notes. If you want to try out some of these, you're eligible for a free sample just by signing up to our website. If you've enjoyed this video, why not subscribe to one of our social media accounts? It can be found on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and of course here on YouTube, where we upload new videos twice a week. Thanks for watching.